Two men journey to the bars and restaurants of Scandinavia to find amazing beers, always with the same question.
Hey, what's on tap?
It's time to find out.
All right, welcome back to What's on Tap podcast, and welcome again, Martin.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm here.
All right, and today I thought Martin's humoring me and being on the show again because I really wanted to do a head-to-head experiment between a rather obscure style of beer, which is an old ale aged in bourbon oak barrels. I don't think there's a lot of these on the market, but I happen to have two versions of this style of beer from two very different beer makers. One is Founders from the US, and the other is a beer from Amager, Backwoods Bastard, a very famous, well-known barrel-aged series. One of my favorite beers. I think one of the few beers I've given a 5 out of 5 to.
A true classic.
I absolutely love this beer. And the other is Patrizio, the Persuasive Peacemaker. And Amager does a great job of telling a story on each one of their beers. It's like 100 words in very fine print. I won't go into the story, but I will take a photo of it and post it with the episode so you can read it yourself. And you'll say, well worth the reading because it tells a great story of all of their characters that they have on all of their beers. and I will say, I love the naming style and standards of Amager and the depths of storytelling that they include in all of their beers. Well, I think last time we mentioned that the Parinto was the same beer as Backwoods Bastard, but one is a wee heavy and the other is an old ale, so not quite the same style. But both are kind of low flavor profile beers that easily take on the adjunct flavors of anything you put into them. So while not quite the same style, not too dissimilar, I think, overall.
Agreed. So when you say whiskey barrels,
No, it's a bourbon. These are both bourbon
They
barrels.
were bourbon. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because the last episode was whiskey barrels.
Right.
But sometimes it'll say whiskey because they mean like American whiskey, which is much closer to bourbon than it is to
Can be, yeah.
Scotch whiskey.
Yeah.
So sometimes the whiskey notation on bottles is a little bit misleading.
True.
Because it could go in either way.
Yeah.
But these are both bourbon barrel.
These are both bourbon barrel.
Yeah.
All right. Well, just looking at the two.
Extremely similar.
Well, I would say the Backwoods Bastard is very reddish in this color. It's not quite opaque, but it catches the light rather well. It becomes more of a kind of a cherry color, whereas the Patrizio is very, very dark. You cannot get any light through that at all.
You're right. I wasn't holding them up to the light.
Yeah, I mean, just on the table, you don't really see that big of a difference. But you hold them onto the light, one definitely has a very clear reddish tinge to it, and the other is just pure black.
Yes.
Smell-wise, what do you think? Let's see. Oh, the bourbon really comes through on the Backwoods Bastard.
Kind of in the Patrizio, the Peacemaker. Right?
It's not as bourbony as the Backwoods Bastard, but I mean, you definitely get that bourbon barrel character off of it.
There's so much caramel in both of the aromas.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can tell that they're both very bourbon barrel aged for sure. They both smell really, really good. As for ABV, the Founders comes in at, 11.2%, and Patrizio, the Persuasive Peacemaker, comes in at a 10.5%. So they're not too far off in the ABV as well. So I feel like this is going to be a very fair comparison.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the Patrizio gets their bourbon barrel. I mean, yeah, they do get the bourbon barrels from the U.S., but I don't think we know where they get them from. I don't think it says on the label anywhere, at least nowhere that I can see.
I don't think Founders say where they get their bourbon barrels from.
They don't. Although the Patrizio has a little Brettanomyces in it.
Huh.
That's interesting. All right. So, any odds-on favorites? Are you expecting one to outshine the other, or?
I've had both historically, but long time apart from each other. I remember, I mean, I've had so many vintages of Backwoods Bastard.
Yeah.
I always love it.
Yeah. Backwoods Bastard is one of my favorite beers. It's one of the few I think I've given a 5 out of 5 to. It is, I think, a stellar, for my money, one of the best things Founders does, hands down. So I'm very interested to see how these two compare. The additional note, the Backwoods Bastard is the 2018 edition, and Patrizio I got, I want to say, at the end of 2017. The Backwoods Bastard comes out in the spring, usually, so February, March, somewhere in there. I think is when we usually get it. So that should be about the same age.
Okay.
Not too far off. So about 9 months to a year.
That makes sense time-wise, because I'm pretty sure I tried Patrizio at the Malmo Beer and Whiskey Festival in March of this year, 2018.
Yeah.
This will come out in 2019, right?
Yeah.
Hello, future people.
Yeah.
Do we have flying cars yet?
Oh God, I wish. That'd be cool. All right.
Yeah.
So which one do you want to do first, Patrizio or the Backwoods Bastard?
You choose.
Let's just go with the Backwoods Bastard,
Yes.
since we know what it is. It's the baseline, I guess. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah, that just makes you smile. That is rich and bourbony and caramelly and sweet, and it just gives you so much.
Yeah. There's a bit of alcohol burn in the flavor and aftertaste, but there's so much round caramelly sweetness.
Just this toastiness in the end mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah, this continues to be one of my favorite beers that Founders does, and one of my favorite beers overall. I've got several of these in my cellar, and I feel like I should buy a couple more every time I try it.
Yeah. I always drink all of mine, so my cellar contains none of these.
Well, you'd be glad to know that you can go to Systembolaget and still buy them off the shelf pretty easily right now. Yeah.
I need to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, when you say toastiness, in this beer, you could either be referring to like a burnt caramelly thing, which exists, or actual toast, which I also get from this beer.
I get a bit of a actual toasted, like roasted flavor is what I'm referring to. Yeah.
But I get actual toast.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like an actual toasted kind of...
No, like the bread.
Like the bread, yeah. That's what I mean. Like there's a bready toastiness, almost with like buttered toast kind of to it, you know? I drink so easy. It's so good.
Yeah.
All right. So both agree, amazing high watermark.
Super good.
Yeah. So the Patrizio.
Before tasting it, I'm afraid that this will taste boozy in comparison.
Very possible.
That's my feeling. Even though it's lower ABV.
Like what? By what? 0.5%? What was this again?
My brain only registered 12 and 11.
10.5 and 11.2.
10.5?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's not that big of a difference.
No. Well, I mean, but still, the alcohol could present much heavier on this very easily. Amager, for as much as I enjoy them, they're not subtle. They're either sink or swim. I don't think that they have a lot of middle ground beers. I find them to either be really, really excellent or kind of, there's not. They hit out of the park or they don't. There's not a lot of middle ground here. I think their stouts and their bourbon barrel stuff has been much, much better. Like the Murph or the Black Mash or things like that, I think are really great beers. Whereas some of their IPAs, not always doing it for me in the way that I want them to.
When you say Murph, is that like Murph Hill? Something like that?
Is it called Murph Hill?
Isn't that like super old?
Oh, they did a rebrew of it
wow.
last year. Oh, did you not do that? Did you not get that?
I didn't.
I got a bottle of that. We can try that later. I mean, not tonight, but another time. We can definitely bring that out.
I didn't try the rebrew. No.
Yeah, they did a rebrew of it last year, 2018. So cool. I got a bottle of that.
I did try the original.
That was the original.
I remember it as really good, but I was it probably came out in like 2007 or 8 when I was really new to craft beer. No,
I've always heard really good things about that, and it was quite the event that they were rebrewing it and re-releasing it. All right, so let's jump into this.
Let's try this. Let's taste it. Cheers.
Cheers. It's also really good. It is a bit boozy, just like the other one.
You get the fumes at the end of the flavor, but it's really well rounded in the flavor.
I don't think it's as rich. I don't think that the mouthfeel is as rich as the Backwoods Bastard, but
agreed.
It's still really good. You're not getting as much as the top of the toffee and the caramel and the sweetness that I think you get off of the Backwoods Bastard. It's almost like, it's going to sound really bad. It's almost like a homebrew version of the Backwoods Bastard.
Like, snap.
It's not really bad, but in the fact that it's still a really good beer, but it's not hitting the same heights as the Backwoods Bastard.
Agreed.
It's very, very good. I mean, it is an excellent beer. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to knock it in any way. But doing a side-by-side comparison like this, you can definitely tell where one brewery is over another brewery and how they work.
Yeah.
Like this is a little thinner. The Patrizio is a little thinner. The barrel aging isn't as dominant. The afternotes aren't as sweet and aren't as sophisticated, I don't think, as the Backwoods Bastard. But it's still really, really good.
Yeah, it's almost sad to compare them because it decreases the rating of Patrizio. It might have held up better by its own.
I think maybe, if it was in a different comparison, it might feel different. But, man, it's good. It's really good. I think it's a really interesting experiment to see how two different breweries can take the same concept and produce two very, very similar beers. I mean, these are not like, because sometimes you'll get two kind of specialty beers and you try them side by side and you're like, oh wow, one is night and day difference. Yeah. But in this particular case, I mean, these two are both excellent beers.
Yes, and they're surprisingly similar. When you say that they're the same style, old ale aged in whiskey barrels.
So bourbon barrels.
Bourbon. Sorry. Yeah. Saying that is a style is quite a stretch.
It is. It is. Okay, specialty style.
I cannot name a single other version of this particular old ale aged in bourbon barrels.
Well, I had to say that old ales aged in bourbon barrels is one of my favorite things to drink. I absolutely love them.
Yeah.
And you're right. I cannot think of too many that I've tried that are out for the public, because Old Ale, breweries just aren't brewing a lot of those to begin with, because they're just not that exciting a style. But when you age them in a barrel in some sort, they really absorb the essence of whatever barrel you're putting in. So if it's a gin or it's tequila or rum or whatever, it's really going to bring out, I think, the best of whatever that barrel you're putting it in is. You're going to get the botanicals, you're going to get the toastedness, you're going to get the caramels, you're going to get the rumminess or whatever. I mean, I think this Old Ale aged in a rum barrel would be equally exciting to try.
Agreed, and I agree with everything you're saying. But let's dig a little bit deeper here, because in a previous episode we tried wee heavies aged in barrels. Mm-hmm. Where is the real line between wee heavies, sweet old ales, and barley wines? Because they're all malt heavy, sweet, strong beers.
I think with the barley wine, you're adding the flavor components into the beer in the brewing process. So within the brewing process, you're getting the cloves and cinnamon and banana flavors and whatever else flavors you're putting into that within the brewing process. Whereas a wee heavy or a Old Ale are more base beers. So Old Ales are, if you look at the history of Old Ale is a beer that was 6 months to a year old, and what you would do is you would blend it with what's called a new ale or young ale to create something that people could drink on the premise. So you take something high alcohol with something low alcohol, you can blend them together, and then you would have a new beer that could easily be sold back before you had hops as a preservative in English pubs. So you needed this in-between beers to be able to sell to the marketplace. When hops was introduced into the beer market, you didn't need Old Ales anymore, so they completely disappeared from the beer market for forever. I mean, for a really, really, really long time. By and large, I mean, there's still some places still making them, but they weren't a common style. It's still not a very common style. But I think what people are discovering is while you're reintroducing the Old Ales, they've become this base style that you can flavor very easily and shift and manipulate into something greater than the sum of its parts. But the problem with like a wee heavy or the Old Ale is it has to be a good solid foundation to build on. So if you don't have a good base to start with, whatever you age it in is not going to make it a better beer. It's just going to make it a shitty beer with flavors added to it. And I think you're going to be able to see that pretty easily in the process. I don't know as much about wee heavies, so I can't go into talking about them.
There's some kind of Scottish heritage, but I don't know enough either. Everything you've said, I agree with when we're talking about a strong, sweet base beer. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Old Ale as a style, mm-hmm. it's so difficult to me because I've had a lot of these kind of Old Ales which are really sweet, strong, and flavorful, and tasty, mm-hmm. really, really, really good. Mm-hmm. But I've also had Old Ales from English brewers where they say that they're making Old Ales in the traditional way. One I distinctly remember is Gales, Gales, mm-hmm. Old Ale, which was sour. Mm-hmm. And they intended it to be sour mm-hmm. because Old Ales were sour.
Right, which is why you blended in with the young ale to balance it out.
Yeah, but you don't lose the sour. There's still an acidity to a historically correct Old Ale.
Well, I would say the Patrizio has more of that sourness to it than the Founders does.
But in this context, when I say sour, I'm talking Flemish Old Red. Levels of sour.
Like an Oud Brun.
Yes. Yeah. That level of sour where you're like, whoa, this is a sour beer. The Patrizio has like a 2% sourness to it, which gives it a small twang. Having that said, I didn't enjoy those sour old ales. I would much rather than have a Flemish Red or an Oud Bruin or any kind of sour beer where the base intention is let's do sour. So this old ale, which is like, we aged it and it became sour in that process, feels like an infection.
Well, I mean, it was.
It was historically, but that's not what I want now in the age of curated yeast strains.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's one thing Carlsberg actually did right in this world is cultivating yeast strains, and the Carlsberg Jensis yeast strain, which was actually pure. That's the biggest thing Carlsberg did for the beer world.
Yeah.
Teaching everyone to cultivate yeast strains.
I think they have the largest collection of yeast strains in the world.
I think so too.
Their laboratories, from what I understand, are amazing. Like, they're really intense.
Yeah.
Like, we interviewed one of the guys from Carlsberg in early 2018, and it was really interesting to learn about some of the heritage and the science behind what they're doing there. I mean, it's like, you think about these big mega breweries like Carlsberg or AB InBev or Heineken or whatever, and, what they're doing in the world. But I mean, love them or hate them, they did a lot of the footwork that today's microbrewer or nanobrewer can really take advantage of. So without those mega breweries, you wouldn't have the ability for Sori or Wylam's or whomever,
Amager.
Yeah, I mean, to be able to do the kind of things that they're doing, because they were able to systemize and standardize and create these levels of strains and perfections that people could take and then build off of and experiment with and get really, really creative with in ways that, I mean, sure, like Carlsberg and Budweiser and Bass or Beck's or whoever can't be flexible enough to compete with, but they have the time and the resources and the ability to create more strains and concepts and experiment that only benefits the small brewer down the line in some way.
Absolutely. And the story of Carlsberg is interesting. My father is a film photographer, like a cameraman. He made in Denmark, he was a part of a production that made a half documentary, half drama series called Bryggeren, or The Brewer, about the Carlsberg heritage. Which is it's a good TV series.
Did he go into about the Nazi elephants?
I don't remember anything about Nazi elephants.
That's what I call them. So if you ever go to Denmark and you get a chance to go to the Carlsberg Brewery, and I highly recommend you do. It is like, even if you don't do the brewery tour, just walking around the grounds is wonderful. It's a great old brewery, and they have these huge elephant statues. They're enormous. And at one point, the logo of the Carlsberg Brewery was the, I think it's a Indian or Navajo, Indian people, not First Peoples, Native Americans. I can't remember where the symbol comes from. Inverted swastika.
Oh, right. The non-Nazi swastika.
Right. The non-Nazi swastika. And it was all over Carlsberg packaging. And so if you go to the Carlsberg Brewery, they have these two enormous, they're like 10 feet tall, like huge, I don't know what that is in meters or centimeters. You'll have to do the conversion yourself. Stone elephants that frame the entranceway into the main entranceway into the grounds there, and they have these huge swastikas, inverted swastikas on their sides. And if you tour the grounds, you can go into the bottle exhibit and you can see the history of the packaging of Carlsberg beers and whatnot, and their history of advertising, and at the point where they have the swastika logo until they don't have it anymore.
Yikes.
It's quite interesting to
It is quite interesting. Before I leave the Carlsberg trail, I just want to point out another anecdote. It's the fact that Carlsberg did not patent their pure yeast strain with the saying that what's good for us is good for all brewers, and that's something that's been lost in today's world, where I sometimes we can see it on a local level where brewers are helping each other, and it's not about the competition, it's about the purity of the craft. So that's quite beautiful, actually, in the historical context. Yeah. The other thing is that the original Carlsberg guy, never mind what his name was.
You call him Carl Carlsberg.
It might have been.
Actually, it might have been.
In his will, he didn't leave a single cent to his son.
That'd be kroner for all of you people.
Kroner, cent. Danske kroner. Everything was left to a special fund, like a fund is the wrong word. A trust. A trust for the continuation of the Carlsberg lab, the laboratory. And that made them, that allowed them to continue operating on these yeast strains that you mentioned, like, I don't know, half an hour ago in this pod. It's probably 5 minutes. Yeah. That was the thing that allowed them to continue experimenting on yeast strains, which has to this day formed our microbrewery and macro brewery culture. And they became such... He did this before he died. So he still lived, his son still lived, knowing that he would inherit nothing. They lived quite close to each other. This is the end of the anecdote. One of them built a brick wall between their houses because they could see each other from their houses. So I think it was the son, jilted by this will, who built a brick wall so he wouldn't have to look upon his father's home anymore.
Wow, that is some next level spite.
That is brutal. But in the grand scheme of things, it was good because, as you said, you interviewed this guy from Carlsberg, and their laboratory actually does good things still.
Yeah. We tried two of their really, really rare specialty beers that they only put out to a couple of... so what they gotten into was gastronomy.
Yeah.
And they brewed these specialty beers that they only put out to like one restaurant in Copenhagen. And they were very... one was a mushroom-based beer.
Wow.
And the other was... I can't remember. They were both very, very interesting and very fun to try. But unless you go to this one restaurant, you'll never be able to try them. So it was felt really special to be able to try those. But no, I think for all of the shit that the mega breweries get, like the fact that AB InBev bought up this one hops producer that basically produced all of the hops that were used in South Africa for only brewing their beers in that region. And then it's like, well, if we have any leftovers, we may sell them to the general market, but pretty much all those hops are taken strictly, completely off of the market. So, I mean, there are some things that you're kind of like, you bastards. But I mean, they do some things that have really laid the groundwork for better things that have happened in the world.
Yeah, there are some macro breweries that are now buying up small craft breweries with the outspoken intention that, we won't interfere with the quality or the production, and then immediately the quality drops. Absolutely immediately. And one example is Goose Island, which still makes their rare barrel-aged lines. Those seem to be unaffected, but their other offerings...
Their Workaday, like IPA and...
312 wheat has become undrinkable.
I haven't tried the 312 wheat in a while. I had... the last time I had the Goose Island IPA, I was on a flight, and I was like, I haven't tried it. Let me get a hold of that. Which is weird, because as much as AB InBev is trying to make its way into the European market, I mean, they have a brewery in the UK now, and they have Goose Island bars in London and in Shanghai, and I'm sure several other places that I don't know about. They haven't really made any inroads into the Scandinavian marketplace because, like, you still can't get any of the 10 Barrel or Goose Island, or we just got our first Wicked Weed on the shelf here recently.
Yep.
Did you try it?
Yeah.
Did you? What did you think?
Oh, I didn't try it off the shelf. I tried it from tap, but it was from their very latest batch. And I mean, with Wicked Weed, I could not tell the difference.
Yeah.
I tried both a cherry super sour.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name. And I also tried their old fashioned, which I enjoyed. I've had several vintage of it. Mm-hmm. It's like this bourbon barrel aged orange zest. Mm-hmm. You get it.
Yeah, it tastes very much like old fashioned.
Yes, I love an old fashioned. I'm an old fashioned connoisseur. Mm-hmm. So when a beer tries to imitate it, it needs to be really good.
Yeah.
And Wicked Weed have made a good run at it.
Well, you know they had the Systembolaget release.
Which beers?
It's just the one beer they had at Systembolaget. But that was November, I want to say.
Okay, so yeah. So
you didn't get that one?
With Systembolaget releases, I buy like one of each beer I have never tried. Mm-hmm. So if it was a beer I had tried, I might have skipped it.
Okay. Well, I have a bottle of it, so we'll have to see which one that was later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm really surprised that we haven't seen more of those beers making their way into the Scandinavian marketplace, because we can get Budweiser off the shelf very, very easily. But we don't see any of their specialty beers making their way over here yet. And I have a feeling it's just a matter of time. Because, and while AB InBev is Belgian-based, I don't see them permeating the marketplace in the way that I thought that they would. Like, they're really focused on the North American trade right now. And I feel like it's just a matter of time before one of the big three turn their eye towards Europe and just start buying up breweries left and right. We've seen a couple of like really, what is it? It's
Heineken bought Beavertown recently.
Did they buy Beavertown?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I knew they bought Lagunitas.
Wait, maybe it's not the Heineken. Someone bought Beavertown, and that ended up in such a big clusterfuck where Beavertown's beer festival, something extravaganza.
Yeah.
Where half of the brewers pulled out.
Really?
Because they didn't want to be a part of macro beer.
It's kind of like the Wicked Weed sour thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it just died overnight.
The parallel is apt. And the Beavertown Beer Festival started to offer people refunds on their tickets. It was that bad. The Swedish brewers, I know Brewski pulled out because they don't want a part of that macro beer fuckery. I know that Omnipollo stayed. They didn't pull out because they're basically big beer.
Yeah, they're almost they're macro for Sweden. I mean, it's
yeah.
I mean, Omnipollo and Poppels are kind of like macro breweries.
I want to do a shout out to Poppels, where I want to keep them in the micro brewery. They're doing good stuff.
I'm not slagging on Omnipollo nor Poppels, but I'm just saying when it comes to, if you're thinking craft beer and you're thinking like no longer microbrewery market, I don't think that you can say either one of those really fall into that category by the simple fact that they are, I will say, omnipresent in the beer scene as far as Sweden goes. And when it comes to export, Poppels is rather present in a lot of beer shops. So I don't feel like they have moved beyond the local craft beer scene, and now they are on the international level. So McKellar, Tuol. I mean, you really can't call those microbreweries. It's kind of fudging that line.
Yeah, I agree.
True, they're not owned by one of the huge, larger conglomerates, but they still are producing on such a huge level and such a huge volume on such a multi-continent level that I have a hard time. I mean, McKellar is basically a licensing scheme at this point, where they just license their name to everything out there. They still make amazing beers, and they aren't following the traditional thing where they make all of their own beers anymore. They're licensing their name out to different places, like what's happening in New York and in London or the UK and in different areas. I think Tuol is also so big. I mean, they're in like 40 countries, and they're producing a lot of stuff in a lot of markets. And I'm not knocking these breweries for doing something. I applaud them. I mean, Omnipollo makes so much beer that we never see in Sweden. I mean, they make stuff that we'll never get here. I don't know where they release it.
Their Instagram feed is crazy.
I never see it on the market here in Sweden.
I actually never see it on the market anywhere.
Exactly. I just think they make beers. They don't actually release them to the market. They just say they do at this point.
Volcano, sea salt, caramel, mudge, mocha, ganache, stout.
Yeah, that was a horrible beer. I absolutely hated that beer.
Oh, I just made it up.
No, but it actually was a beer. They kind of, I mean, you hit most of what they put in that beer, and it was called like Amager or
Amurga.
Yeah.
That
was horrible. That was hot garbage.
Okay, so we're moving back. There's two parts to my beer nerdery.
Mm-hmm.
One is flavor,
mm-hmm.
where the only thing that matters is the flavor. No, I don't. That part of me doesn't care about history or politics or anything. It's just about flavor. Then there's another part of me. It's smaller. It's not 50-50. It's smaller, where I am a beer purist,
mm-hmm.
where I feel like being independently owned is a beautiful thing.
Oh, I think so too.
There's a beauty in that. Doing your own thing and fighting against the man has a value,
mm-hmm.
because the underdog story is beautiful. The struggle to achieve greatness, that's beautiful. And that part of me thinks that whenever a brewery even communicates with Belgian De Proof Brewery,
mm-hmm.
they've left underdog status. They're almost not allowed to call themselves microbreweries anymore.
So then Omnipollo, McKellar, Tuol just started or going to start brewing their own beer on premise. I still think they're going to brew a lot of their stuff
at the proof.
But I think they're going to do a lot of their more experimental styles on their own premises. I don't think they'll ever be 100% brew everything under their own roof. Because they just do too much stuff.
Yeah. You're naming all of this is exactly where this conversation is going, because the flavor part of me still loves all of these brands, because a lot of their offerings are really tasty. But the Puritan in me, I mean, you're allowed to do... I might be a hypocrite. You're allowed to do contract brewing if you're contract brewing at another small brewery. Yeah. But as soon as you go to the proof, you're mass producing it.
So let me ask you a question. And this is my own ignorance here. Does the proof actually brew any of their own beer? Or are they just like a warehouse where they just brew beers for people?
I have seen actual The Proof beers that are branded by The Proof, made by The Proof. There's no other brewers involved.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely boring. The Belgian Ale 101.
Okay.
No frills. It's made for a mass market. You know what I mean. When I say Belgian Ale,
mm-hmm.
It's not a double, it's not a triple, it's a Belgian Ale.
Yeah.
Period. Those are the kinds of beers I've tried from The Proof. being the proof.
Yeah.
And I think they just make that to fill up any small gap they have in their production scheme. It's a production scheme at this point.
Yeah, I mean, because they are just cranking out beers for bigger brewers.
Yes.
Okay. Circle back around to the beers we have in front of us.
Both are, as far as I know, independently owned.
Oh, yeah. Founders brews all their own beers. Patrizio, Amager brews all their own beers on premise.
Founders is like Grand Rapids, Michigan. Is
Grand
that them?
Michigan.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. They aren't... I want to say they are the 4th or 5th largest brewer in America.
Oh, they're allowed to be big.
Yeah. No, they're a huge brewery, and so we've been to MBCC the past 2 years. The last interview we always do is with the head brewer for Founders, and I hope we can keep that tradition alive. Absolutely love talking to Jeremy and then those guys at Founders. I think they do wonderful stuff, and Backwoods Bastard still amazing beer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For me, sweet, clean, boozy. It's just like perfection in the glass. They have nailed the style 100%. I have to go with still a 5 out of 5 for me. I absolutely love this beer.
For me, this is a 4.5.
Yeah.
It's a good rating. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I completely understand. And I don't give 5 out of 5 very easily. But every time I have this beer, it just hits all the notes. It just sings to me in a way that few beers do. And I just wanted to keep drinking it, even though it's a huge ABV. It does not get old. It doesn't get boring. I could drink a whole bottle of this any day of the week. I'd be very, very happy drinking it. And I don't get a 5 out of 5 on the first drink, the first time I have a beer. But after I've had 4 or 5 of them, it just keeps something I keep wanting to go back to. I keep wanting to drink and keep wanting to taste. And for me, that's what this beer is. And for the Patrizio, the Persuasive Peacemaker.
Yep.
I gotta say, this is an exceptional beer. I really, really enjoyed this one. I think I found my sweet spot when it comes to beers. Bourbon barrel aged old ales. Because I'm going to give this I think a 4.5. It's very easy to drink. It's not the flavor bomb that Backwoods Bastard is, but between the two, I've almost finished my Patrizio. I still have quite a bit more of the Backwoods Bastard, and I've been reaching for it a little bit more, I think, because it is a little bit lighter in the flavor notes. Yep. It's a little bit easier to drink. I wish I had more bottles of this now. So yeah, 4.5 for me on the Patrizio.
I mentioned earlier that the Patrizio we're not doing it any favors by comparing it to the paragon of this style, the Backwoods Bastard. And I'm sticking with that. So I'm actually giving this a 4 period. I would have given it higher if we had tried it next to like an IPA or something completely different, because the Backwoods Bastard is dominating it.
Yeah, no, it does. It definitely.
So we have the same difference in
we do. I don't think we're so dissimilar in our views on this, but I think they're both just excellent beers, and I for once, this happens very often, because when you start comparing these things, they usually one falls apart pretty easily, and you can definitely see where the edge is. But both of these are really, really solid beers.
Yeah, a 4 is a really good rating in my book. I try to be unbiased when I give ratings, but when I look upon my massive ratings with an analytical eye, mm-hmm. I see very clearly that I have an extreme bell curve focused on 3.5. Like the bell curve is it's so extreme where I give the majority of beers I try 3.5, and then it dips quickly. So 4 is it's a high rating.
Yeah, no, I mean I am kind of there with you. I think a lot of things fall into that 3.25 to 3.75 range. And I probably give a lot of beers like a 3.5, 3.75. Yeah. They're really a 3 or a 3.25, depending on how I feel. And I'm like, oh, this is better than I expected. So I'm going to give it a 3.5. I really enjoy this at the moment. I think you're like based on what I've seen of your reviews, I think you're a little more adjusted for like more realistic. I think I tend to grade a little bit higher.
Maybe, but
I'm not as high. I'm not as skewed as I used to be. But yeah, for me, this style really is in my wheelhouse, and I think both of these are great beers.
Yeah, it needs to be said. I am not rating to style. I'm rating to flavor. So I've never given a Pilsner a 5 out of 5. There are some people who do. If it's a perfect Pilsner, they believe that it should get a 5.
No, I'll argue that point. I think that within a style category, you can have a perfect style, even if you don't think it's like I go to the Goza to Hollywood. Yeah. Goza to Hollywood. Would you ever give a Goza a 5?
I've given Gozas nearly 5.
Right, but it's not a style that you automatically go, this is a 5 out of 5. No. Style, because they're not ordinarily meant to be on the high end of that grading curve. But if you look at a certain beer and you think, all right, so what would I change about this beer? What would make it okay? So if this was like a 4.5, what would you do to make this a 5 out of 5 beer? What could you change? What would you adjust to make it a better beer? So having said that, you gave the Backwoods Bastard a 4.5. So what would make this a 5 beer? What would flavor wise make it a 5 beer for you? What could they add to this or change or enhance to give it that extra 0.5 for you?
In this particular beer, a slight thicker body.
Okay. But okay, having said that, I see what you're saying, but the old L style isn't a heavy style body beer.
Agreed. I don't want it as thick as a pastry stout. Mm-hmm. I want it a tad thicker. Mm-hmm. I want the after flavor to linger a little bit longer. And I want a little bit more vanilla in the bourbon notes.
Oh my God, more vanilla? I mean, this could not be more vanilla unless you added a teaspoon of vanilla to it.
Disagree.
Oh, it's so vanilla.
We haven't even mentioned vanilla a single time during this entire podcast episode.
But this is so vanilla. I mean, this is almost vanilla extract vanilla.
Not in the aroma. I get malt sweetness. Is not vanilla in my mind.
Okay, in the aroma, it does not hit you with a huge vanilla flavor. But in the taste is a huge vanilla flavor in your mouth.
There is vanilla.
There's a lot of vanilla. There is so much vanilla in this.
The vanilla exists.
Crazy. I think if you had it more vanilla, you wouldn't like it.
You put your finger on the right spot because I actually don't know. I feel like I want more vanilla. I'm absolutely certain about wanting a tiny bit more thickness.
No, I can understand the more body part of it.
The aftertaste, it actually doesn't linger. It disappears quite quickly.
I don't think the vanilla lingers, but I think that the raisiny...
The entire flavor disappears quickly.
I don't think so at all. I think it has a lingering vanilla, resinous, raisiny kind of lingering flavor to it.
I tried it again, and I don't agree. This might be connected to the viscosity of the beer. If it coats my mouth, I'll taste it for longer. This doesn't coat the mouth. It disappears quite quickly to me.
Yeah, but for me, you have this lingering sweetness on the lips and the mouth and the tongue, and it just makes me want to drink another sip of it.
I'm not getting the exact same...
All right. Well, obviously you're a flawed person.
Well, we already knew that.
Obviously. Okay. So I give 5, 4.5, 4.5, and
4.
And 4. All right. I think those are very good ratings for these.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A fun, interesting experiment all the way around. A lot of interesting talking points here. So you can find us online at whatsontappodcast.com, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube,
Subway graffiti,
everywhere that you go. Find us online wherever you can find podcasts available to you. So until next time,
keep drinking, you dum-dums.
Your goodness, so good.